We're live. Hey everybody, Lisa Niven Kelly here for beeducation.com, and I'm in our new studio and I've got the lovely Laura with me today.
Hi.
She's behind the scenes checking comments and helping me out. And today we are going to do a metal stamping refresher. When somebody comes on into our group or they call Laura, oftentimes the first question is, I'm not getting a deep impression. My first question to them is, what does your setup look like? I've heard a lot of variety of things, but in general, the issue that they're having that we're able to correct is either they're using a really small bench block that might come in like a really economy kit that you got on Amazon or something. Little tiny thin bench blocks just aren't strong enough. They don't give you enough resistance to get the stamp to sink into the metal. That's one thing. If that little block has little rubber feet on it, you want to pull those off because it'll make it bounce. That's another thing. And where you put that block is also very important. So if you are working on a table, say like my table behind me, if you work right over the leg of your table, you're going to get better resistance. Also make sure that you don't have you're not using a little table on like a thick carpet. That will cause an issue. Or a really light hammer. Make sure that there's nothing under your bench block besides something really hard like a sandbag. So I used to stamp with like a dishcloth when I first started under my bench block because it helped absorb the sound and it wasn't like crazy loud. And it caused it to sort of bounce a little bit. So if you're going to have something under there to help absorb the sound, it needs to be something very hard. So we sell sandbags. Like you can see, this is mirrored, so I'm all confused. You can see my purple one there that I use on my stamping post. And you put your bench block on there. We sell now 9" by 9", which fits most bench blocks. It can be small or bigger. And we also sell some for ring mandrels, so they're long. You want to make sure that you get the ring mandrel or the bench block like nestled into the sandbag, right? So I'll show you the bag when we do the down camera, and I'll go over like fun things about it. Okay, so that's it for the general setup. You want to make sure it all comes down to the resistance underneath the metal. Also, it comes down to your like confidence with the hammer. If you're really scared, you're probably going to hit it too lightly, or you're going to not hold the stamp sturdy because you're afraid you're going to hit yourself, or you'll only hit one side of the stamp, or you're scared so you'll use a light hammer. All of those things are going to impact the impression in the metal. So you need a good big bench block that's at least like a 1/2 inch thick. My preference is a 4" by 4" that we have. I think that's a little less than 1/2 inch, but because it's bigger, that makes up for it. You need a good strong hammer. We use brass hammers, and every now and then I use a steel hammer if I'm using a really, really tough stamp because it just gives it a harder blow. And I'll show you the hammers once we turn around. And you need to make sure you're also working on the correct metal. So if you're a beginner and you're trying to stamp on stainless, that's going to be really rough. I don't even stamp on stainless. I hate it. It's a very hard way to sell the stainless blanks, Lisa.
How do you really feel?
Salesman of the year. It's a very hard metal. If I do stamp on it, I just do letters mainly. I don't use a lot of design stamps on stainless because it's difficult. Brass is also very hard. Sterling can be very hard. With both of those metals, I recommend annealing them, which is like a whole other thing. You can look on our YouTube page. It involves heating the metal to soften it, so it really takes the impression well. You don't really need that with aluminum and pewter and sometimes copper. So if you're just starting out, we recommend aluminum or pewter. Pewter's like bleh, bleh. You just mush it right in there. Okay, Laura, what are we looking at for questions? Anything interesting?
I think the one thing that's been coming up is a couple of folks mentioned they'd like some tips on stamping rings.
Okay, that's going to be a whole nother video, and I like that because I'm making a list of the videos that I'm going to make. Stamping on rings will be coming up. Honestly, and Laura, you can tell me your opinion. Whenever I get someone that's struggling, it's almost always the bench block. They're using a tiny little thin bench block that came with a kit, and the minute you switch to a different bench block, this is not a sales pitch. I don't care where you buy your bench block, just buy a bigger bench block. Everything falls into place.
That's a big part of it. And also sometimes very beginners starting with those big, gorgeous, super detailed flower stamps.
Jumping straight to
or
the
like,
top.
something else that's really complicated.
Right. So the bigger the stamp, the more detailed the stamp, the more difficult it is to stamp. Remember this, you're not removing the metal, you're moving it. So all of those details have to press into the metal and move evenly for the whole thing to look correct. So if there's a lot of details or it's big, that's difficult.
And that's why it's going to be so different from stamping a little letter. That's real simple.
Totally. Yep. A little small letter. Also, I assume you guys can hear Laura. Okay, right?
What about an anvil?
You can use an anvil. Just make sure it's super, super sturdy. I mean, those big ones like in your garage that your great grandfather passed down to you. I don't have one, but that's my dream. Those are great as long as it's really sturdy and a solid metal, a good tool steel that will give you the resistance. Cool. All right, let's flip it around and I will cover a couple things. But first of all, what is that? Is that some new stamps I see? Yes, it is.
What?
What? Okay, so luckily I've got this, oh, hello Purple Boots. Hi there. I've got this cool setup where I can kind of move my camera around easily, but you can see here I've got my stamping post. We have directions on how to make this on our website under Learn and under Helpful Guides. It's really great because it's standalone. It's not a part of my table. I put my feet on it when I work just to keep it stable. The trick is to make sure though that all these are flat so that when you put it on your ground, it's not wobbly, right? You're trying to avoid the wobble. But because we have just this strong piece here, that's where all the force goes and it gives like a really good resistance. So I've got my bench block. It ain't pretty, I don't care. And here's my pad, also not pretty, don't care. So when you get your pad, it might be like all the sand to one side. Make sure you fix that so, you know, obviously, see, a bench block isn't like that. I just do this and make sure everything is flat, not tilted. It looks tilted, but that's because of the camera. Cool. Also, look at all my stamps. And also, look at my disco ball holder. And again, with the Purple Boots. Okay, focus, here we go. So, in addition to your bench block being settled, you are going to want to use at least a 1 pound hammer. This is the hammer I use. It's by Fretz. It's not cheap, but it's great. We have also this style that we've carried forever. This is the 2 pound hammer. We also have it in 1 pound hammer, much more affordable. We now have the fancy new Impress Art hammers with a replaceable head, which I love these because I love the length of the handle. When I use this guy, I'm always choking up and holding it up here. So the Fretz hammers are nice because they have a steel side and a brass side. When you stamp with the brass hammer, it is going to chip. The whole deal here is this is a softer metal that kind of grabs and sinks into the stamp to get a really good impression. So this is going to get all messed up, and don't worry about that. Just move that off. You can eventually either replace this head, this comes off with a little screw, or you can kind of get a machinist or somebody to smooth it out for you. But I've actually never changed my Fretz hammer head. This is the 1.5 pound. It seems silly to have 1 pound, 2 pound, 1.5 pound, but I tell you, I love them. I love them all. I use a 1.5 always, unless I have a gigantic stamp, and then I might bump up to a 2 pound. This is my favorite. If you have just a nail pounding hammer at home and it's working for you, stick with it. We have tons of people that just use a regular old hammer from Home Depot. The issue is sometimes you might get bounce back, or sometimes it might not be heavy enough, but if you got a big old hammer that you just plucked out of your garage, stick with that. If that's working, awesome.
Show the face of the brass we have someone mentioning that they always hit like half one section of their brass hammer.
Yep, that's me. You can tell. So see up here, I am a top of the hammer kind of hitter, obviously, because you can see that this one looks a little more even. But that's just the way that you personally strike, the way that you always hit it. Some people will be dead center, some people will be down here. But for me, obviously, I'm always up a little high as well. It's not a big deal. If you find, sometimes I find when I'm stamping that everything I'm stamping is deeper on the bottom half. That just means that you're either hitting it more this way instead of on top, or you have subconsciously your stamp tilted a little bit. You know, like instead of being straight, you got it tilted a little bit and you don't realize it, or you're hitting it here. So just watch your impressions and sort of overcompensate if that's something that you do on a regular basis. Okay.
One other question on setup so far, and that is, do you have any guidelines in terms of how high that post pedestal should be for stamping?
No, that's just a comfort level. Some people like it pretty low so they can really get on top of it. Some people like to stand. Mine is just a basic table height, which I think is like 3 feet, something like that. So that's really up to you. You can also get an adjustable chair to make up for if you want it taller or shorter. That's a great question. All right. Our best tip for impressing stamps is the tilt and tap method. We coined that term. I remember when Kate Richburg came up with that term. She's so good. Tilt and tap. It's not anything we invented. I'm sure people have been stamping like this forever, but it's something that we love to pass on to our customers. One thing I'll say is tilt and tap doesn't work great with a really big stamp, and we'll go over that. But I'm just going to get a basic stamp like this. Let's see if I can get focus. Mushroom. It's like it's a 3/8 shanks. That's a normal, like, classic size. Not a lot of detail to it. So for this one, I'd probably use the brass head. And me personally, I just do one good hit. I'm just used to that. I know I'm working in aluminum, which is a very soft metal. If you are using a lighter hammer, or you feel like you need to get a better impression, I need to fix my sand a little bit here. And there we go. You can do the tilt and tap method. So here's an over exaggeration. You're going to hit it once in the middle, boop, and then tilt one way, hit, south, west, and again in the middle. The first time in the middle and the last time in the middle are important, because if you only tilt, you won't get the middle. See? So one time in the middle, and that's a nice deep impression. Focus. So you can see when I first showed you, it was an over exaggeration, but when you actually do it, you should like barely see it, barely see it. Here's another really, really important thing that I think we should actually add to the directions, Laura, is you can't be lightly holding your stamp, because then if you, well, it worked out okay, but if you move at all, you're going to get a shadowed look. So let's say you go, this one's too easy. But what I recommend is hold the stamp, get a good grip on it, press it into the metal, and really press down. Like I'm really, really pressing down. See my thumb turning white there? And then you'll get a good impression. So that, again, I mentioned larger stamps.
Yeah, do a big one.
Do a big one. Do a big one. Let's try, there we go. Okay. So this is, I think, one of our most difficult stamps. What's it called? Like a Sierra tree or something? It has a ton of detail, a ton. So if I were stamping this onto something, I would use my heaviest hammer on the stainless part. And me personally, I would just give it one good whack. So I'm holding the stamp, I'm pressing it down, and I have a camera in my face, so I hope I don't mess this up. Just give it one good whack. Now you can see well, no, that's actually okay. Let's get a little focus action. See how much detail there is in that stamp? This is aluminum, so it's not difficult. I would never attempt it in stainless. And if I was using copper, brass, or sterling, I would anneal it. But for tilt and tap on this guy, I don't usually really succeed because there's so much going on that if you, when you're tilting and tapping, shift at all, you're gonna lose it. So if you're gonna use a tilt and tap, make sure you go very slow. I might move to a lighter hammer. Yep, I blew it. I jumped it.
What about one of those big, more round shapes, like a big flower? We've got Amy Myers is suggesting maybe the sunflower daisy.
Funny you should ask because I've got it right here because I knew that's one of the more difficult ones. Same thing. So again, with the tilt and tap, make sure you are barely moving it. If you go crazy like this, sometimes I even barely, almost hit it just on the side of the stamp as I move it. So you may not have seen, but I was tilting it, but it was very slight. If you over tilt it, you could get a shadowed look, like what happened over here. That guy. For me, especially if I'm stamping in aluminum or something like nice and soft, I'll change to this hammer now. I just give it one good whack. I'm pressing it into the metal. My hammer's coming straight on top, and I'm trying not to let anything move. It also helps to tape your metal down. That sometimes helps things from the right place. So you can see the flower on the right is lighter because the ones next to it, I did the tilt and tap, so I really got it in there. I keep pieces of metal like this around. I have a huge aluminum scrap bin that I will eventually figure out how to recycle. And I always stamp and practice first on a practice piece before moving over to my actual piece to make sure, one, I can stamp the stamp well, and two, I've got it all worked out, holding it, lining it, and all that. You got something to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes to a good impression, and you can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes, sometimes I think people feel like it needs to like really be sunk in there, or is a complete impression that's a little bit lighter, like maybe that last sunflower, is that considered a good impression? Like, what's the guidance?
Yeah, a good impression is the whole thing is impressed, and after you blacken it and wipe it off, there's a good amount of black in there, because if it's really shallow, the black will just pull right off. So all these impressions are right. The other thing though is if you're making a big piece and you stamp something harder than something else, let's see if there's anything in here, then it will show up really, really dark, like maybe these grass things, because they're really small.
And you can even,
can't really tell on this one.
On fine detail, you can actually lose some of the detail if you try to stamp it in too deeply.
That's right. And I have a piece here to show you that exact thing, which is one of our new stamps. So this is a little baby, come on, there we go, a little baby cactus, and it's meant to build into a bigger cactus. So like you could go like this. Oops, you can see where I'm going with this, yeah? Fun? Build your own cacti.
So fun.
So fun. But this guy's it's real small. It's got a lot of detail. So I find that if I hit it very lightly, maybe with a light hammer, it comes out much better than, especially after you blacken it. I don't know if you can really tell, but the one on the left there, you can see the detail. The one on the right, it's starting to kind of smush together. So ones with a lot of detail, like this cactus that's coming up here, there's a lot of detail. And if you hit it too hard, you start to lose it.
Does the thickness of the metal make a difference?
Yeah, so the thickness of the metal will, if the thicker the metal, sometimes the easier it is to impress in it. People often think the opposite, that thinner metals are easier, but a thicker metal has more like girth to sink into. It's like thicker. There's more metal to sink into. You can imagine, and I'll show you here. Here's 2 copper pieces. This is 18 and this is 24. There's not a lot of metal to impress into here. So like we talked about before, you're not removing it, you're just pushing it in. And where's it going to go? You know, we sell, and I stamp on a lot of 24 gauge. It's acceptable, but it's easier sometimes to go into a thicker one because it can just sink in directly. Yeah, I don't know what else I was going to say on that. All right, so people struggle the most with the very detailed stamps, which makes a lot of sense. If you're just starting out, do something like that first mushroom and lighter. You know, the longer stamps are also difficult. The thing I do for those is instead of tilting and tapping, I tend to like hit it at this corner and then hit it at this corner. And I go left to right. Well, and then try to get that. I did not do it. See, I just do better. Yeah. This one, when I tilted it, I lost it up here. I also have a camera right in front of my face, so I can't see well. But, you know, you hit it that way. So it's all about getting to know your stamps. All right. One thing I also want to note, well, you probably can't see it because I didn't do it, but when I stamp, let's say I'm just going to stamp this baby mushroom over and over again. I stamp and I put my hammer down. I mean, unless I'm like really doing a bunch, but if I'm stamping, put my hammer down, because this is heavy and this is really hard on your wrist. So rest it. You know, if you're going and picking up another stamp, don't hold it up like this. Put it down and take care of yourself. Mechanics are very important. Ergonomically, that will take care of your body, but also mechanics on how you sit and how you come on top of the stamp rather than the side of it will make a big difference.
That's body mechanics is one of the reasons why I love putting the 4x4 block on the 9x9 sandbag, because it raises a little bit off so that the side of your hand can be like resting on the side of the bench block, and then your wrist can go down from there, as opposed to trying to be, you know, your wrist bent trying to hold it.
That's a really good point. I never thought of that, but she's saying it gives you like a nice little, right, like ergonomic rather than good one. I think so. That's what we're covering for just talking about the basics. We're not going to get into like lining up letters and things like that. That's been covered many times in the other videos, or maybe I'll do that in a separate video. But if you're just getting started and you're having issues, those are the things that we hear about that we're able to correct. Yeah?
I think getting to know the stamps, how you stamp, and practicing it, and just like without an expectation on an actual piece, just practice and spend some time. so that you build up that muscle memory and also kind of that instinctual, the sound it's going to make, the way it feels when you strike it. It
Yeah.
will become like intuitive.
Yeah, and natural.
Over time.
Yeah. Sonia says she notices she stamps only 1/2 with her 2 pounds. So you're probably coming at it at an angle and not realizing it. So watch your impression. If it's heavy on the right, then move your hammer or like consciously almost tilt it to the left. That's what I have to do sometimes.
We've got a new question asking about the sandbag and the rubber block.
Some people have luck with the rubber block. To me, it's too bouncy. It's very dense. It's not like rubber, like super bouncy rubber. But if you're using it and you're getting a shadowed look, try pulling it off and seeing if that helps. If you're using it and it's great, right on, stick with it. We used to sell it, but I find the sandbag to be much better. And the rubber block, depending on the rubber block, I've seen them in really cheap, like Amazon kits come with the bench block, and the rubber block is bouncy, and it's just, the cheap kits are so frustrating to me because it's going to frustrate you. And it may not be you, it might be your tools. You might be venturing into this new awesome fun craft and be frustrated and give it up, but it wasn't your fault. It was the tool's fault. Again, I don't care where you buy it as long as you get good quality bench block. It makes a really, really big difference. So I'm going to try to do Facebook Live more often. My setup is so easy now. I'm just like good to go at any time. The next ones, I'll do one on ring stamping, but we also have classes already on ring stamping. You can look on our website where the classes are starting to flow over, but everything's on our YouTube page or channel. Head over there. There's literally hundreds. We have 213,000 subscribers over there. We have a silver play button, which I didn't even know was a thing until they sent it to me like 10 years ago and my kids freaked out. Whatever. But we got a lot of followers over there and they're learning a lot of stuff. If you jump over there, please hit the subscribe button. I hate to sound like a commercial, but it helps us know how many people we're reaching and helps us get our message out. I think that's it. I also want to do more videos on things that aren't stamping. I mean, I've taught seed bead work and wire work for like 30 years now. So I've got in
Since
this
you were a
niche
baby.
since I was 2. But I'd like to start playing with that stuff again. But stay tuned. We always send out a newsletter that sends a link to the Facebook Live, and come join our group and go check out YouTube and subscribe. Put some likes up there, put some questions up there. We are here for you. Right, Laura?
Right. Give me a call.
Yeah, and have you ever noticed, you have, that if you call, a person answers the phone and it's Laura, and I hear her talking in her office for 45 minutes to you, because she will, until she fixes your problem. It's amazing. She's amazing. And thanks everyone for stopping by. Bye.
Bye-bye.